Hello everyone and welcome! We still have one Demacian hero to talk about, or should I say two heroes. After that we have two Demacian stories related to multiple champions, but since everyone wants me to talk about Wukong and Rengar, we'll see how that goes. For now, let's have a look at Quinn and Valor. Quinn and her twin brother Caleb were born in Uvendale, a remote mountain town in the northeastern hinterlands of Demacia. You may also recognize this name from Poppy's story. They were raised the same way as all Demacians, believing in the nobility and righteousness of their homeland. Uvendale was a town of hunters and farmers, protected by mountain rangers who specialized at killing monsters that came down from the high peaks to hunt. While the twins were young, King Jarvan III visited Uvendale on an inspection tour of the East Wall, the barrier between Demacia and the lawless tribal states beyond. Raised high above the crowd by her father, Quinn watched the ceremonial march of the king and his warriors. The shining armor ignited pride in Quinn and Caleb, and they vowed to become knights of Demacia, so that one day they could fight alongside the king. Their childhood games were mostly about pretending to be heroic knights, defending the land from monsters, savage Freljordians or black-hearted Noxians. And when they were not playing, they spent every moment they could in the wilds surrounding Uvendale. Their mother, who was one of the village's foremost rangers, taught them how to track beasts, how to survive in the wild, and most importantly, how to fight. Over the years, Quinn and Caleb developed into a formidable team, working together in a way that brought out the best of both of them. Her keen eye for tracks, his skill in baiting their prey, her aim with a bow, his prowess with a hunting spear. But one travel high into the mountains north of Uvendale ended in tragedy, when the twins encountered a party of Buvele nobles hunting a giant tuskvor, a predator known for its thick hide, long razor horns, and ferocious temperament. The nobles had failed to kill the creature outright, and the wounded beast turned on them, goring several of the family's younger members. Quinn and Caleb were quick to intervene. They drove the tuskvor off with a flurry of arrows into its skull, but not before Caleb was gored to death by the creature while saving the Buvele matriarch's life. The nobles thanked Quinn profusely, and helped her bury her brother before gathering their own dead and returning home to mourn. Caleb's death almost broke Quinn. They had dreamed of fighting as a pair, and without her twin by her side, Quinn's hopes of becoming a knight seemed hollow. She fulfilled her duties to her village, as was expected of any daughter of Demacia. But her heart was broken, and the joy that had previously energized her slowly evaporated. Without her brother by her side, her prowess in the wilderness waned, and she started to make mistakes. Nothing life-threatening, but she missed easy tracks, her aim was off, and she became dour and uncommunicative. She often visited Caleb's grave, unable to move on as their memories played in her head. A year after the day of Caleb's death, she returned to the mountain as she had many times before. Lost in grief and reflection, Quinn didn't hear the approaching tuskvor. Between the razor horns crowning its skull were broken shafts of arrows she and Caleb had loosened in their previous battle with the beast. The monster charged, and Quinn desperately fought for her life against the enraged beast. She fired a dozen shafts at the creature, but none of the arrows were accurate enough to find a weakness. Exhausted from the battle, Quinn stumbled, and the beast was upon her. She dived from its path, but not quickly enough. The tip of its horn sliced her from hip to collarbone. Badly wounded, Quinn fell as the beast circled around to finish her. Quinn looked the beast in the eye and knew this was her death. She reached for the last arrow in her quiver as a flash of blue sliced through the air. A beautiful blue bird swooped in and raked its claws over the tuskvor's face. The bird was an azurite eagle, the breed that was said to be extinct. This was the breed that inspired the winged symbol of Demacia. The screeching bird dived again and again, its claws and beak ripping bloody gouges in the tuskvor's skull. even as the beast's horns gouged its body and tore its wings. Quinn slowed her breathing and drew back the last arrow as the monster bellowed in fury and charged. She loosed, her bow stave snapping with the force of her draw. But her aim was true, and the arrow flew into the monster's mouth to pierce its brain. The beast was dead. Quinn crawled where the eagle lied, its wings broken, and saw in its eyes a deep well of kindship. She bound the bird's wounds and returned to Uvendale with the Tuskwar's horns as a trophy. The wounded bird perched on her shoulder the entire way, refusing to leave her side. She named the eagle Valor and nursed him back to health. The bond that formed between them rekindled the fire in Quinn's heart, and once more, her thoughts turned to serving Demacia in battle. With her father's help, she crafted a new weapon from the horns of the Tuskwar, a finely wrought repeater crossbow capable of firing multiple shots with a single pull of the trigger. With her parents' blessing, Quinn and Valor traveled to the capital and petitioned the drill masters of the Demacian army to join their ranks as a ranger knight. Ordinarily, years of training were required to serve in the highly disciplined Demacian army. Quinn did not have such training, but she easily passed every test the full ranger knight set in front of her. The drill masters had no idea how such an incredible hunter and her unique eagle might fit into the rigid command structure, so they prepared to reject her petition. But before their verdict was delivered, Lady Lestara Buvele, the noblewoman whose life Caleb had saved, intervened and vouched for Quinn's courageous heart and great skill. Quinn was immediately inducted into the Demacian army, and though she proved to be a fine ranger knight, she struggled with the inflexible hierarchy and, in her view, needlessly prescriptive regulations. Her fellow warriors acknowledged her skill, but still viewed her as something of a wild card, a Demacian who preferred to operate outside of orders, who crafted her own missions and came and went as she pleased. When a Noxian assassin struck down Castle Jendale's commander on the Day of Lost Light, Quinn's talents proved themselves once again. The killer escaped battalions of knights dispatched to capture him, but Quinn and Valor tracked and killed the assassin after a night of lethal traps, counterattacks and ambushes. She returned with the assassin's blade, earning the nickname Demacia's Wings. Quinn remained in Jendale just long enough to receive her commendation, before she and Valor once again departed the city to return to the wilderness where they felt most comfortable. Since then, Quinn has ventured far and wide in the service of Demacia, risking journeys into the far north of the Freljord and deep into the Noxian Empire. Each time, she and Valor have returned with intelligence vital to the security and defense of Demacia's borders. The following story happens during one of her scouting missions. Quinn waited for the Noxians to light a fire in the forest clearing and drink 2 wineskins. Drunk soldiers were easy to predict. She wanted them drunk enough to be stupid, but not reckless. Mistakes got you killed in the wilderness, and these men just made 2 big ones. Lighting a fire told her they were overconfident, the wine that they were sure no one was in pursuit. Rule 1. Always assume someone's after you. She sneaked closer through the mud on her belly, using her elbows to pull herself toward a hollowed rotten log at the edge of the clearing. The rain had turned the forest into a quagmire, and she'd spent the next few hours picking bugs and worms from her clothes. Rule 2. Survival never takes second place to dignity. Careful not to look directly at the campfire to lose her night sight. She counted 5 men, 1 less than she expected. Where was the 6th man? Quinn started to ease herself upright, but froze as the hair stood up at the back of her neck, a warning from above. A shape moved from behind the tree in the darkness, a warrior, armed in boiled black leather, moving with skill. The man paused, scanning the darkness, his hand never leaving the wire-bound hilt of his sword. "Hey, Warden!" called one of the men seated around the fire. Better hurry if you want any of this wine. All meadows drinking it all. Rule 3. Stay silent. The man cursed and Quinn smiled at his obvious frustration. Quiet, he hissed. I think they heard you back in Bloody Noxus. Ah, there's no one there, Warden. The Demacians are probably too busy buckling on their armor and giving it a polish to bother with coming after us. Come on, take a drink. The man sighed and turned back to the fire with a wary shrug. Quinn let out a slow breath. That one had some talent, but he too believed they were alone in the wilderness. Rule 4. Don't let stupid people drag you down to their level. Quinn smiled and glanced up, seeing the smudge of night blue darkness of her eagle companion against the rain clouds. Valor dipped his wings and Quinn nodded. Their wordless communication refined over the many years together. She circled her right fist, then raised 3 fingers. Knowing Valor could see her perfectly and would understand. Rule 5. When it's time to act, do it decisively. Quinn knew they should just take these men out quietly without fuss. But the affront of Noxians this deep in Demacia was taunting. She wanted these men to know exactly who had caught them, and that Demacia was not some primitive tribal culture to be crushed by Noxian ambition. With the decision made, she pushed herself to her feet and strode into the campsite as if it was the most natural thing in the world. She stood at the edge of the firelight, her hood raised and her oiled storm cloak drawn tightly around her. "Gimme what you stole and no one has to die tonight," said Quinn, nodding toward a leather satchel stitched with the winged sword symbol of Demacia. The Noxians scrambled upright, blinking as they scanned the edge of the forest. They fumbled to draw their swords and Quinn almost laughed at their surprised reactions. The one who had almost walked right over her hid his shock well, but then relaxed as he realized she was alone. "You're a long way from home, girl," he said, raising his sword. "Not as far as you, Warden." He frowned, taunted by the use of his name. Quinn saw his mind working as he tried to figure out how much more she knew. She kept her cloak pulled tight as the men spread out surrounding her. "Gimme the satchel," said Quinn, a note of boredom in her voice. "Take her," shouted Warden. It was the last thing he said. Quinn swept her cloak back over her shoulder and lifted her left arm. A black-shafted bolt from her repeater crossbow buried itself in Warden's eye, and he fell without a sound. A second bolt tore itself into the chest of the man to his left. The remaining 4 came at her in a rush. A screeching cry split the night as Valor swept down like a lightning bolt from a clear sky. His claws tore the face from one Noxian, and the eagle's slashing beak clove the skull of the soldier next to him. The third Noxian managed to raise his weapon, but Valor sank his claws into his shoulders and took him to the ground. The eagle's beak slashed down and the man's struggle ceased instantly. The last Noxian turned and sprinted for the trees. Rule 6. If you have to fight, kill quickly. Quinn knelt and loosed a pair of bolts from her crossbow. They hammered into the Noxian's back and burst from his chest. He managed to reach the edge of the trees before pitching forward and laying still. Quinn remained motionless, listening to the sounds of the wilderness, making sure no other enemies were nearby. The only sounds she heard were those she had expected to hear in a forest at night. She stood and Valor flew over to her, the satchel of military dispatches the Noxians had stolen in his claws. He dropped it and she caught it with her free hand, looping it over her shoulder in one smooth motion. Valor perched on her arm, his body ripping with the thrill of the hunt. His claws and beak were red with blood, the eagle's head cocked to the side. She grinned, her bond with the bird so strong she already understood his thoughts. "I was wondering that too," said Quinn. "How did these Noxians get this far into Demacia?" The eagle gave a shrill screech and nodded in agreement. "Yeah, that's what I was thinking," said Quinn. "South it is." Rule 7. Trust you can rely on your partner. And that was the story of Quinn. For now, that is all the main updated stories from Demacia, but there is still one side story between Lux and Garen, and one more between Lux and Galio, but that will come another day. For now, thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, feel free to click the like button below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories in the future. You can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook and Discord if you'd like to chat. Again, thank you so much for being here and for your support, you know I really appreciate it. And as always, thank you come again.